Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. Today I'm going to talk mainly about barbarians and my thoughts on the proposed changes to the class. Also, I'm going to give a little bit of a character update. And while I'm doing that, I'm finishing up my Caught in the Web flagging, running a little bit of Reclaiming the Rift. It's a pretty scary dude right there. It's a nice splash screen, actually. Pretty sweet. Might have to use that for the cover of this video. Okay, but anyways, on to barbs. At first, when I read the changes for the 3 barbarian trees, Frenzied Berserker, Ravager, and Occult Slayer, I initially liked them when I read the Frenzied Berserker tree, and in my last video I even mentioned that I liked them, but I think I might have spoken a little too soon. First of all, I actually like the Frenzied Berserker changes except for the lack of DPS, but the developers have a idea and a direction on the class which seems to clash with what a lot of players want. The developers want to, first of all, give barbarians some sort of self-healing, which is fine. And I think that's okay as long as they don't overdo it, as long as it's a form of healing that prevents babysitting, but not a form of healing that allows them to be completely self-sufficient, because if they were given that, they would be too similar to fighters. And I like the idea of barbarians not being self-sufficient and being all about DPS, because I think that gives them a certain flavor that makes them unique from other classes. We always see a barbarian, and when I think of a barbarian, I think of a angry, raging hulk of a warrior that just blows away all its foes and doesn't care about the damage that is being taken, and it just brushes it off because they're so tough. They have a lot of hit points, a lot of physical resistance, and other qualities. But when I think about barbarian, I don't think about self-healing. Now, there's 3 different kinds of self-healing that the developers have introduced with these trees. The first of which is the Frenzied Berserker self-healing, which I actually like. It's a slow regen. Basically, the barbarian will have a sort of an aura, just like the cleric aura or the death aura that wizards have, except it won't heal others. It will just heal the barbarian. And what that will do is give them a slow tick, a slow regen every so often. I don't know how often it's going to be, but it would basically give them a slow regen, which is a good thing in my opinion, because it would reduce the need for babysitting. So I'm actually in favor of that one. The thing with the regen, though, is it's going to be tough to balance. And I hope it's balanced so that it is powerful enough in that it prevents babysitting, but not so powerful in that it's dependable in combat. It does not need to be dependable in combat. I think that would make it overpowered. Now, if I can find my way through this quest, I can actually concentrate on what I'm talking about. I'm not too familiar with this quest. I generally am not a big fan of these quests because I don't play in mouse look mode, and the levels in here are not flat. Sometimes there can be a bug if an enemy is caught in a wall, because you have to destroy all the enemies to advance. Okay, but anyways, back to the self-healing. So I like the Frenzied Berserker self-healing, that's fine. The next is the Occult Slayer. The Occult Slayer is a barb tree that relies on Weapon Bond, which is sort of like a charge that builds up as you use a certain weapon, and it builds up stacks. And what the Occult Slayer heal does is it's going to work like a full heal, except... Where is that? Oh, there it is. See, the problem with this quest, as I said, it won't open up unless you kill all the enemies, but sometimes they can get stuck or won't come down, so you gotta find them. But anyways, the Occult Slayer heal, I keep getting off track, I apologize. The Occult Slayer heal is going to work as basically a full heal, but it will cost the Occult Slayer all of their stacks of weapon bond. So it won't be able to be used very often. So basically what the devs are doing by introducing these different trees are introducing different flavors of healing. And they want to use that for some reason to give the barb trees different flavor. Now I think they should focus more on offensive and defensive capabilities as a way to differentiate the trees. But they are using these heals as a major feature, and it's probably going to be the most popular thing in these trees. Now the Occult Slayer heal I don't like for one reason. I think it's going to be darn near impossible to balance. They can't make it usable too often because it'll be overpowered, and if it's not usable often enough, then it's going to be very, very weak compared to the other healing. And I just don't see a way to balance it, because it's a heal that they can't allow barbarians to have too often, because if they did it would be overpowered. But being a heal that's so infrequent that cannot be used very often as it stands, no one's going to take that tree because they would rather have the dependability that the other healing offers, that the dependable, consistent regen that the Frenzied Berserker gets, or what the Ravager gets, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, on to Ravager. Ravagers get a on-hit, per-hit healing. Now, I'll be honest, I hate this idea, and I hope the devs reconsider. What they want to do is basically give barbarians healing these Ravagers a healing for each hit the barbarian makes, and also a heal for each kill that they make. So it's going to work sorta, kind of like the old Master's Blitz. And that's what I don't like about it. The problem with this ability is, one, it's going to be tough to balance. Two, it's going to discourage party play, because the more members are in the party, generally the less hits that the Ravager is going to get, therefore the less healing. So the barbarian's actually made weaker by more members of the party, so it encourages soloing, discourages grouping. And the other thing is, I fear it's going to be overpowered. I think that it's very easily going to be manipulated, because the barbarians are going to have huge healing amp. So I'm kind of worried that barbs are going to get way too much healing out of this. So for those two reasons, I just don't like it. So now that I've covered the healing, which really is ironically the major features of these new barbarian trees, I'll go on to the DPS portion. And I won't get into too much detail on this. If you want to look at all the little intricate details, oh, I can't talk today, you can go to the DDO forums, go on the focus discussions thread, and you can read all of the specific DPS changes yourself. But all in all, Severlin, who's the developer, I don't know if he's the lead developer, but he's the guy that always talks in the forum, so he seems to be the leading guy, or one of the leading guys on these changes. He made a post that I was really disappointed with. He said that, and I'll quote, this is his exact post, the design goal is that the DPS, he's referring to paladins, and barbs should be comparable if they're both built for DPS. So he's saying that, in his opinion, barbarians and paladins should have the same DPS, comparable DPS. And this makes no sense to me. I don't think this makes any sense. I think this is a faulty assumption that the barbarian class can be competitive if the developers have this premise. And in the Ravager thread, I made two long-winded posts about this where I tried to explain why I feel Severlin, his logic is flawed. And I'll just read it to you, or I'll try to read as I'm playing here. It's hard to do both at once, but I'll go ahead and read for you word to word my response to him saying that Barbs and Pallies should be comparable in DPS. Here's my post word for word. What? I don't understand. How can Barbs possibly be a class that is competitive with Paladins if they only do comparable DPS? Could someone clarify this for me? Shouldn't Barbs do more DPS to make up for all the penalties they take? Yes, the new Barbarian trees offer some nice stuff like regeneration healing, HP boosts, and healing amp. However, Barbs also have the huge penalty of no casting abilities, the inability to splash Paladin or Monk, no heavy armor proficiencies, etc. Surely, the goodies of the Barb class doesn't come close to what Pallies have, which is the best saves in game, inherent healing spells, the ability to use Blade Forged Reconstruct, useful buffs like Death Ward, etc. If I'm building a melee, why in the world would I pick Barb over Pally? They both have comparable DPS, but Pallies are way more survivable. How in the world are Barbarians a competitive class? I think we need to make Barbs the undisputed best melee DPS in order to make the class worth playing again, especially in Epic Elite where they'll be taking lots of damage and needing help from other characters. If Barbarians are going to require some outside healing help, unlike other melees, they need to do better DPS in order to make up for it. In other words, they need to be worth healing. Let's consider a scenario where a group of 6 is running an Epic Elite. If the Barbarian is doing the same DPS as the Paladin in the party, yet the favored soul is losing 50% of his DPS because he's having to stop and heal the Barb constantly, then the Barb is a drain on the party. However, if the Barbarian is doing 150% the DPS of the Paladin in the party, it will roughly even out with the 50% less DPS that the favored soul is dishing out. And surely the inherent Barb healing that's being proposed in these changes won't be enough to keep up with Epic Elite damage, because if it did, it would definitely be overpowered. So Barbarians are going to need some outside healing assistance in Epic Elite for sure. And as long as they need outside healing assistance, they need to make up for the DPS lost by the character having to heal them. So again, how will Barbs be a competitive class if they only do comparable DPS to that of a survivable, self-sufficient Paladin? I just don't see it. Barbarians need to have the best melee DPS in order to make up for all the inherent self-sufficiency, survivability problems that come with being a Barbarian. Both the party and the player need to be willing to put up with these disadvantages. It needs to be worth it for both. And this is coming from someone, this opinion is coming from someone, me, who has played clerics almost exclusively in DDO for over 5 years. I have lots and lots of experience healing, and I enjoy serving as the party healer, and would love to heal Barbarians in the future in Epic Elites, but I just want them to be worth healing is all. Severlin, I know you've stated that you don't want to go with the glass cannon approach because you don't think it fits how the game is played currently. I think based on the overwhelming feedback you've received on this topic, you should reconsider. The reason it looks like players don't play the game in the way of a glass cannon strategy is because there are no builds in DDO currently where it makes sense to give up self-healing. There's little to nothing to gain in exchange for giving it up. If players could gain top DPS in the game by sacrificing self-healing, a lot of players would jump all over it. Why? Because melee players love seeing big numbers. It doesn't matter if the Barbarian class is not overall the best. As long as the class offers the best and biggest numbers in the game, a lot of players are going to play it. And because of this abundance of self-healing, this is why teamwork has disintegrated in the game. Barbarians could finally give players a reason to give up self-healing. And in the process, introduce a viable reason to use teamwork in a party again. Okay, so that's the end of my post, and it was a long-winded one, but I really wanted to get my opinion out to the developers. I wanted to make sure it was clear, and I really hope they read it. And I know I missed a few windows here in the quest reading that post, but it's tough having to read and play a game and look at your own health bar all at the same time. So bear with me if I look too terrible in the gameplay just now. And that post got several +1s. A lot of people commented on that post, which is why I wanted to read it. A lot of people seem to agree with me and really seem to highlight it and want the devs to read it, and I really hope the devs do read it. Alright, I'm almost done with this barrier part. Just one more to go. If you haven't done this quest before, this is an infight here, and every time you click on this barrier, you have to kind of sacrifice a bit of your HP in order to get the barrier down and also survive these waves. That's why my HP is getting lower and lower and lower. Okay, so I got a lot of positive responses from that. Now I've yet to get a developer response. Developer actually has not commented at all on that thread yet. Actually, there have been no comments, I believe, in the last 2 or 3 days. I made that post 2 days ago, and there's been no developer follow-up since in that thread, replying to me or not. I had one player who responded and said, I'm just going to click and find it. Here I have an internet browser open on my other screen. Thank God for auto attack. Allows you to play the game and search the internet at the same time. As long as your HP isn't low, you don't have to worry about dying. Watch me die and then wish that I'd run epic normal. I don't really care about XP. I'm at level 27 and I'm getting close to level 28. And at this point, I'm so close to cap that I really don't care about XP. And I'm planning to stay at cap for a while. So I don't care about elite streak or anything like that. Alright. So this guy that responded to me, he basically said, hey, do you really want to go back to the days where players are dependent on clerics? You know what, I'll just go ahead and read his response. He said, some interesting thought. Wait, let me just start over again. Here's his post, word for word, in response to my post. He said, some interesting thoughts in your post here. But do you remember the heyday of the Shroud and all those giant bags of HP, aka barbarians, that were swinging away on Harry every 2 seconds and then crying for clerics to heal them? I sure do. Back in those days, people took healers for granted and frankly abused them at times. This is one reason why finding healers became harder and harder, as most wouldn't heal unless they knew the group. As a result, the player base adjusted, and self-healing and bring your own heals became the law of the land, to the point where if you didn't have any self-healing, you were now the odd one. And I won't read the rest of his post because it's a little long-winded, but he's basically saying he doesn't agree with Barbarian DPS being boosted. He thinks it's okay to stay comparable. and he thinks that the developers' changes are adequate, which I completely disagree with. And here's my response to his quote. I'll read it as soon as I can figure out where the heck to go in this quest. Okay, let's try over here. Oh, I remember this quest, actually. Alright, sorry, I'm getting off topic. I apologize. I know I've been a little bit of a rambling mess. Alright, good. I'm glad the quest is over. I want to talk about barbarians and not be distracted. Okay, here's my post and response. I'll just read it word for word. I believe bring your own heals became the norm because there is no reason not to be. With the introduction of Regeneration Cocoon and later Blade Forge Reconstruct, there is no reason not to be self-sufficient. As I said in my previous post, there is nothing to be gained by not being a self-healer, which is why everyone does it. If there is something to be gained by giving up self-healing, aka a glass cannon, lots of people would jump all over it. You have a legitimate concern that people may not want to give barbarians the support they need, even if it is a viable approach. I know I'm willing to heal barbarians, but others may not feel the same. However, today is a vastly different game than when Cap was 20. Now, almost any class can support barbarians with Cocoon, Renewal, or Consecrated Ground. And Warforged and Bladeforged barbarians will be able to be healed by all the Bladeforged running around via the Reconstruct SLA. And lots of classes have cure and heal spells, so even if it's not through Epic Destinies, the same classes that could help out with healing back in the day are still able to do so. So overall, it's not only on Divine's shoulders to heal barbarians. And you're right. If you're right and barbarians are unwanted in some groups, so be it. It's so much better for them to be unwanted in some groups than to give barbarians too much self-healing and make them virtually identical to fighters, which would add nothing to the game. However, right now with the proposed changes, barbarians are glass cannons, just without the cannon part. In my opinion, there's only two ways to make barbarians viable. We can, number one, remove the rage penalties and let them self-heal like everyone else. I believe this is a terrible idea, as it would make barbarians too similar to other classes and strip barbarians of their uniqueness and flavor. You may as well just take them out of the game if you change who they are. Number two, make the barbarian penalties worth it by making barbs the best melee DPS in the game. This is by far the best option, as it gives players a unique playstyle and flavor that we're currently lacking in DDO. Until the developers go in one of these two directions, barbarians will not be viable. Only having comparable DPS is not acceptable because it won't make up for all the penalties that barbarians take, all the penalties that are inherent to being a barbarian. Now, I'm not going to repeat the rest of my post. You can go to the forum if you want to read it, but I repeated several things I mentioned in my first post. But overall, my overall point and overall opinion that I'm trying to get through all my rambling in this video is that barbarians have to be the highest DPS, melee DPS in the game to be worth playing. As I just quoted in my post, the only way to make barbarians viable is to either make healing them worth it or let them heal themselves. There's no way around it. You can't just give them comparable DPS to other melee classes because they don't have the defensive abilities of other classes, so they're going to fall behind. They have to do more DPS to make up for their lack of defense, for the lack of casting, for the lack of self-healing and survivability. The developers need to go in this glass cannon route with barbarians to make them a worthy addition to the game. As I just said in my post, they can't just strip the penalties away and let barbarians cocoon themselves and Bladeforge reconstruct themselves, because that's going to make them way too identical to fighters and it's not going to add anything to the game. And look, I'm biased. As a cleric player, I would love to see some party play come back to the game. I enjoy healing, and I would love to see a reason to heal again. But so I hope that the barbarian class is one that actually is going to need some healing, because I enjoy doing that. And while a lot of people love bring your own heals and they love to play that way, that's fine, but it doesn't mean we can't offer a viable alternative for those who want to play a different way. Again, even if they make barbarians totally dependent on clerics, that doesn't mean you have to play a barbarian. There are lots and lots. Every single other class is capable of being self-sufficient, so what's the harm of introducing one that is complete, that gives up all self-sufficiency in order to do, say, 150% the DPS of the next best melee character? And that's my opinion. I think that's a good benchmark, is to give barbarians about 150, a pure 20 barbarian frenzied berserker, in my opinion, should be the #1 melee DPS in the game, and do about 150% the DPS of a level 20 paladin. And when I say 150%, I mean 50% more. I don't mean 150% more. I mean, if a paladin is hitting for 4,000, the barbarian should be hitting for 6,000. So I mean only 50% more. I don't want to confuse anybody. And the reason, as I've said and repeated, they have to do more DPS to make up for the fact that you're losing DPS. The cleric in the party, me, I'll be losing a lot of my DPS in order to heal the barbarian. So if the barbarian's going to need that healing, barbarians are going to have the lack of self-sufficiency and all the defensive problems that they do have. They need to be worth healing, or they're just going to be a detriment to the party. So overall, I'm not happy with the changes. I really, really hope that devs right now aren't responding to these threads because they're considering a change, and I hope they keep the barbarians some of the healing. I like the, as I said, I like the Frenzy Berserker's slow regen. I like the idea of making it so we don't have to babysit barbarians in between fights, but there absolutely should be no way barbarians should be healing themselves in combat. And to make up for this, the barbarian trees right now, they need more DPS added, and the new proposed changes don't do that. So I would like to see developers keep the healing on a small scale, but add a lot more DPS. So if you're interested in this class and how this is going to turn out, I suggest that you pay attention to the forums and chime in with your opinions, and I will definitely have a video in the future to update you on any further changes the developers make, because they're probably talking about counter proposals right now, because the player base has been so vocal in not wanting to go the way of the developers. They're not very happy with the developer changes, unlike the Paladin changes, which were, well, I wouldn't say completely acclaimed. They were largely very pleasing to the player base. These Barbarian changes are not. So I hope the developers come back with a counter proposal, and I'll be excited to see what they come up with, and I will keep you informed. So until next time, we'll have more videos coming out soon. I hope you keep watching, and thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, please throw me a comment and tell me what you think about Barbarian changes. See you next time.